Not this fucking time. You don't get to lie to me about it. I'll just look at you for the liars that you are. Okay. And hopefully, it would be nice if they didn't shut it down every time that somebody burst that bubble. Holy shit, it's not like I've got a trillion people watching me, or perhaps I do. I just don't know that. So, what did I say? Unpopularly popular, or popularly unpopular. Not here to coddle you, nor should I, nor does anyone coddle me, nor should they, nor do they. When was the last time somebody ever coddled me? When was the last time somebody considered my feelings or considered how I want things? Never. So don't expect it from me. You have not earned that. I've tried it. Okay? I've tried to be sweet and kind, and I still am. My patience, I want to have patience, but some things, in my belief, just do not deserve that type of patience. Furthermore, is that this thing where censoring people's communication or how they choose to narrate or how they choose to speak about things is just way overkill, especially when folks can watch this woman be murdered that way. And I don't care that y'all have suits on. The fact that y'all can marry, the fact that all of you in your suits went on to murder this woman this way. I don't care what your reasons were. Nothing. You say a knife, I say what? Are you scared of one skinny, what? She couldn't have been over 5'5". One, with a knife? A knife. You've got clubs, tasers, squirt guns, dogs, and guns. And y'all all shot fires into this one woman? Are you serious? You could have called her a cab and had her go home. Who cares? I don't care if she is a so-called crackhead. Not my business. And how dare any of you, this whole thing where you guys get to judge someone and their drug usage? Are you fucking kidding me? I'm shocked at people who don't use something in this bastardly version of what you call world. It's more like a cesspool, if anything, decorated and really altered. You have to be high or self-medicating or using some type of pharmaceutical or some very intense therapy or sex. Get the porn, do something to distract you from reality, because people like me, thank you, that will go on and dissect this monster for what it is. Vile. What permits you, the ones who laughed and made jokes and found it funny, to witness this woman be murdered like this? I don't care if she's a crackhead, as you call her. You don't even know as to how she got there. And that's the thing, is you guys just simply don't care. I don't care if this was a meth head, an alcoholic. I don't care if this was a porn star. I don't care if this was a homosexual. I don't care whatever genre of person is. Nothing excuses such a vicious and animalistic, savagely approach of neutralizing the situation. And what was the situation? Nothing that permitted that. Wow, that's the levels that we're at. We're really at. It's just, you just taken lives that you did not create, and you call that protecting and serving? Wow, insulting, very insulting. And as a woman, I say, holy frickin' cow, because us women don't stand a chance against that shit. It doesn't matter, unless she's got all types of whatever you got your vest or whatever on. That's freaking vicious. And nor do I consider this to be ethical for a male either. This is absolutely absurd that you guys accept this and you condone it and you found that to be funny. I looked and I seen, and hardly any of you had any criteria as a response that would clarify that you are a so-called civilized human. You're so far from it. I see nothing but jokes and making fun of this woman being murdered that way with all them bullets sprayed into her, and this is what you guys consider to be entertainment. You're entirely desensitized. I don't think there's any waking you up. But I just go on to say is that this is the reason why I don't trust you guys. This is the reason why I don't like to interact with people. This is the reason why I don't think I'll ever be able to have stable grounds with you, because you have clearly no empathy. You clearly are ungodly creatures. You're wretched as could be. Nothing, I don't care what type of individual or person or human this is, nothing would condone this and make it acceptable as to how people are killed every day this way by your so-called members that are so-called keeping you safe. Au contraire. Although I may not be able to clarify what normal truly is, I know for certain what is not normal. What is not normal is this now accepted norm, or for quite a long while what has been accepted as normal, which it is not, which is this brutal and ill, cruel, bitter, and callous interaction between many genres of human, quote-unquote, people. And the most common is this scapegoat dynamic, and I'm sick of it. I find you all, most, I don't know all of you, I'm saying majority, based off of an opinion, an assumption, and based off of what I've read, based off what I've seen, and my day-to-day interactions for the past however many years I've been here. And this is an intolerable method of so-called living. It's not living, it's dead. It's dead as hell. And that's exactly what you guys have created, which is hell. Okay? No thanks. Thanks taking, not thanks given. Okay? The most common scapegoating dynamic in the US of A, and it's very likely, based upon my opinion, and probable, that this same method of so-called societal normalization of scapegoating goes on outside the US of A, which is women/females of color. And also this would go for the so-called Caucasian working class European male. Okay? Furthermore, the suppression of her voicing her experience of trauma is not only shunned, it's denounced, attacked, ridiculed, downplayed, or drowned out by the common, not just women of color. I hear that one all the time. It's not just you. What about the rest of us? And this is the issue. And this has been a great neutralizer or silencer, is any time that any genre of people, with the exception of these two classes of people, which would be males of color, especially the so-called African American and the Caucasian European Americanized version, not the outliers, which would be of European descent who were not raised in the factory of US of A. The ones that were raised outside the factory of US of A, their voices are very valid, and those voices have been silenced for quite a long while also. And often I'd say that sometimes in their cases, their societal scapegoated position or role may even be worse than WOC, but that's for another discussion. So, whenever WOC is attempting to voice her concern or express herself or go on to seek justice or even going on a rant, and this thing about this AWB, or what is it? Yeah, ABW, which is a so-called acronym for angry black woman, as if some of us don't have a reason to be angry. It's called righteous anger, and I'm really sick of people trying to really tame that. There's nothing that needs to be tamed. Meanwhile, while we're subjected to this unjustifiable role of being some type of terrorist or being mean or evil or vicious simply because we chose to open up our mouths and dare to speak. That's the only thing. You're not suppressing me. I don't fall for your traps as far as what I'm limited or not capable of saying. I'm capable of saying whatever comes out of my mouth. Whatever I so choose to say, that is what I dared to say, and I will say. Okay? And these are just words. I wish you guys would find the same energy that you hold towards me and my words. I wish you would find that same energy towards these actual injustices that occur all over this planet. Okay? So, this happens to men. That's something that we're usually neutralized with it, or it happens to men also. I know. And the men that it happens to, their voices are suppressed. And the men that it happens to, society has warped everybody's mind and painted them to be scapegoats, and then to constantly blame them of being the typical racist or being the typical sexist simply because he's a Caucasian, European, working class male. Okay? So anything that the actual so-called victims, whether we want to be victims or not, we are victimized and we are ostracized and we are mistreated. That's just what it is. Otherwise, why else is it going on? Why is this whole thing, this campaigning of the slave ship having left? When did the slavery end? I'd like to know. Somebody update me on that. Okay? Because it has not. Anyways, what about us? Something else tends to happen far too often, which is the societal acceptance of women of color and other outliers all over. It ain't just women of color. However, what I'm saying is this silencing of and diminishing of us being mistreated or for it to be condoned. Like anyone else, for anyone else, this is a criminal activity what goes on. But for us, it's like we're not only invisible, but we're supposed to be men. But not only are we not supposed to be men and being men at the same time, we're supposed to pay like a man, work like a man, think like a man, be like a man, take on the brutal attacks like a man, and be raped also, and then be incarcerated for not being a man. I'm really confused as to what the hell you guys really think we are, like pixie magic fairies. Not saying that we aren't magical, because I don't know why we would still be here in this predicament. You guys have done such vicious and vile things. It is astonishing how we are able to really have the capacity to even continue to speak without having to shut down. But anyways, resilience is not something that I consider to be proud of, by the way. This theme and accepted normalcy of this societal abuse upon WOC, making a mockery of her trauma and her pain, revoking her so-called status of scapegoat or victim, and a repeated stance of penalizing her unfortunate events of quote-unquote victimhood. You know, the very thing that I'm not supposed to claim, by one, punishing her for voicing her woes, woe is me. Two, punishing her for being a victim, woe is me. Yeah, excuse me. One was punishing her for voicing her woes. Two, punishing her for being a victim. Three, offering excuses to justify the harm that was done to her, and offering excuses for the perpetrator to justify the harm done to her. 4, taunting her, for example, with these commonly done statements is, "What are you, a victim?" Or, "Oh, here we go, the pity party." Okay, yeah, woe is me. Or it's not the end of the world. Oh, life goes on. Hashtag Me Too, which was hijacked from WOC, which is now being masqueraded and paraded and used and slightly assimilated by WW. And also these statements, you should be lucky that you're still alive and count your blessings. And there are others who have it way worse than you do. You think that because there's a worse or more a more dangerous and despicable role that I'm supposed to feel okay with what is being done. No, of course things could always get worse, but could we actually look at the half full stance, which would be things could get better? Let's stop going with this approach of things could be worse, so just count the blessings that you do have. I do count my blessings. Wish you guys would take your own advice and realize what you withhold and steal from others, all in the essence of keeping and hoarding things which are not only for you. And this does not just apply to the physical, material aspect. Okay? So, number 5 is not holding the criminal offenders, perpetuators accountable. Number 6 is denying access to those services that are offered to other women, and which in all actuality are supposed to be rendered to WOC legalistically or legally speaking. Number 6, several occasions, whereas when WOC, which I know from personal experience on all of these, that's why I'm able to voice them, is on these occasions where we've reported the abuse to the authorities, officials, services, departments, organizations, institutions, and our complaints or our report is not taken seriously. It's not even considered as valid. Okay, it's not considered as true. It's all these whatever. Nothing is noteworthy or nothing to take down. Little to no effort is made on the behalf of these departments and officials and services and authorities, organizations, institutions, and programs. And little to nothing is done in the process of the so-called work that needs to be cited, recalled, addressed, informed, researched, investigated, brought to justice, and then penalized. That would be the perpetuators who have done this unholy, unforgivable act and behavior. Okay? And then there's been no arrests made on our behalf. The criminals, and there's so many of them, and here's just a few, which are the pimps, exploiters, rapists, killers, murderers, traffickers, and drug pushers. And then, but the correlation between the drug pushers and the pimps that work hand in hand right along with some of the authority, that are often, in many cases, the reasons and the root cause as to why you may see many WOCs addicted, misusing, and self-medicating on pharmaceuticals and or so-called illicit drugs. Okay? Little to nothing is done for WOC when it's in reference to and regarding to her filing or attempting to report these matters. Those who are guilty of harming her, little is done to put a consequence upon them or to consequence them and hold them accountable. There may be on occasions when some type of justice is done. However, there is really no comparison. The unjust and the unprocessed outweighs the processed and justice that has taken place on behalf of WOC and the offenders of her. And the reality is that little or nothing is done in efforts to protect, defend, respect, or bring justice to and for WOC. Number 7 is the abuse and the dehumanization of WOC is used and viewed as a means of entertainment. And it is enjoyed by many so-called genres of people, whether that is male or female. Okay? And this is funny. Watching someone being humiliated, murdered, destroyed, exploited, raped, pimped, prostituting, stripping, in this role of ignorance or arrogance, uneducated, more than one baby daddy, so on and so forth. All of these, of which I've just listed, are the perpetuations and the root cause of several biases or the promoter of these biases and stereotypes, and it's a misrepresentation, and it goes on to depict a negative projection which instills and teaches prejudice and as well as discrimination. And this has a lot to do with the influence of how others interact with WOC because of this mindset, of which was crafted through the viewing and the consuming of such a disgraceful misrepresentation of WOC. And the opinions about her are derogatory and are often just biased based off of this. So if one had not interacted with WOC prior to being assaulted with this propaganda and media and music and whatever advertising, perhaps it may have been a different interaction. However, many were groomed to have this dislike and this very derogatory mindset towards WOC due to the indoctrination and through grooming and programming. Okay, and this mindset and opinion about WOC throughout society is distasteful, it's inappropriate, and derogatory. Many negative projections, such as hypersexualization, objectification, demeaning and defaming WOC's character, heightening the disbelief in her, this exceptionalized ideology of WOC as mere object for sexual satisfaction and gratification, a servant, a slave, an invalid character, invisible, inhumane. This one, a mule, a scapegoat who accepts ridicule and abuse. She's a baby factory, a gold digger with low to no class. She is trashy, poor, impoverished, ghetto, ratchet, uneducated, welfare queen, bald-headed, no hair, weave-wearing, long fake nails, hoe skank, stripper, prostitute. These stereotypes and false narratives can be seen and heard throughout the industry of media and through the promotion and distribution of such, whether it's through a device, on the channels, through the television, radios. You can hear it in the songs, you can see it in the movies, you can see it all throughout these television shows, in the commercials, and even in the day-to-day. Okay, you will see those who will mimic due to their indoctrination and programming. So they go on to parrot what they are seeing on the television and in the songs, because it is easy to manipulate the mind, especially from such a young age or from the mindset of adolescence, to enable them to reenact this behavior. So then just misleading her and through social programming. So outliers like myself, quote unquote, okay, who are described to be in a so-called better social status, which is untrue. If being of mixed ethnicities is a so-called privilege, need I declare that one, it's not, and due to colorism, which is a systemic oppression, which goes on not just by the so-called WS, white supremacy, the false narrative of such, which I do not identify as white supremacy. I identify it as anywhere from extreme to covert terrorism and the usage of controlling this, it's a scapegoated role. It's a narcissistic societal construct. It's not just white, Caucasian Europeans who keep this going. It has a lot to do with many genres of people. And I'd even take it a step further and say, if it were not for these genres of people, that WS would likely not even exist. Because WS seems to protect a certain type of two classes of people that have been able to fulfill this victimhood role, while the two others have not been able to, as well as the outliers who do not get to. It's not a privilege being a witnesser or the experiencer of abuse at such an extreme level and malicious. And it's just, wow, it's diabolically unethical, diabolically savage. So, and then, number one was colorism, where this abuse can go on, where an outlier like myself, quote unquote, outlier like myself, can be ridiculed and abused for speaking, and then be statements that I will make that I heard often throughout adolescence is how I am, quote, trying to be or sound or talk white, or the question of, why do you talk like a white girl? Or do you think you're better than somebody? Oh, you must think you're cute. No, I don't think that I'm cute. You evidently do. I know that I'm gorgeous, but it has more to do with my physical aspect. Being abused and raped and not believed, or being subjected to and groomed and misled, or it's so many levels of atrocious behavior. It's unforgivable. It's truly unforgivable. And from a so-called human aspect. Now, when it comes to your religious and your spirituality, that's you. I don't go by the same principles that you do. I am not denying God. Just do not lie on my God is all I have to say. And yeah, I trust in God. I don't trust in you. There's a difference. It's very telling, this notion and request of this coddling. And coddling anyone's feelings is rather interesting. And it's very interesting considering how WOC and how WOC's feelings in this US of A, in this role of scapegoat, are rarely, if not ever, are her feelings valid or in regard. Women of color, scapegoated and targeted. Scapegoated feelings are barely or hardly and likely. Our feelings are not considered when it comes to the legacy of this trauma, abuse, maltreatment, and these ill interactions, and the penalization of not just our feelings, but our entire lives simply because we exist. Many groups and individuals least interested, many groups and individuals are not at all or very unlikely to have any interest into the regards of how WOC actually feels. And that's been an issue that I've experienced since I've came into existence. The usage of words and the deliverance of such are not altered or censored or less offensive when it comes to the scapegoat's feelings. Several enable, join in, permit, condone, are silent, laugh at, are neutral, indifferent to, or are the very direct sources of this very trivial and uncivil act, of which is not just speaking, but the behaviors and the abuse done and the maltreatment and mistreatment to WOC. And what permits such misuse and irresponsible acts of crime? What permits such abuse and the exploitation of WOC? What cognitively allows the genres, so-called ethnic groups, so-called citizens, and the so-called indifferent or neutral classes of people to uphold this accepted, normalized assaulting WOC and of the other innocents simply existing, such as US of A's scapegoats and women of color? How can genres of classes of so-called people, so-called citizens of the US of A's consider and or accept that their participation is justified in this allowing and permitting of WOC to be the Christ and sacrifice, and expecting and requesting that her kindness show up each and every time that she comes and speaks with anyone, and taking offense to what scapegoats and women of color's truths are and their audacity to vocalize it? How does one kindly communicate how inappropriate and cruel a vast majority and variety of groups have been to her and these individuals, and how they are to her in her existence in regards to the experiences and interactions on so many levels? How are we kind about that? And not just on a personal, physical level. There's so much propaganda and advertisement, media, music, and cultural assertions, such as school in your neighborhood so-called communities, when the societal norms have warranted and allowed this to happen. Okay? And then certain sects of women, and by sex, SECTS, sects of women, will then exclude. Okay, so when the society is supposed to has a sector that serves as a protector of a sector of women, will then exclude, refuse, or even go on to punish and or ignore another sector of women, to take it a step further by denying WOC scapegoats validity and experiences. Accountability is a factor that tends to go unchecked, and it's almost non-existent in regards to WOC and SG's experiences of this historical and legacy of abuse and or the mistreatment and maltreatment of SGs and WOCs. For if WOCs and SGs are evidently hated and unrecognizable, we're invisible, and we're not citizens, and we're not people, we're not individuals, we're not human, and we're not anything, really. We're just punching bags and throwaways, according to you, not according to me, but according to how we are treated and how this goes on, and how there is so much evidence that would confirm that to be valid, that you see us not as human, you do not see us as people, you do not see us as women, you do not see us as living beings. So why not just be courageous enough, since you're bold enough to do everything else? Why not just state then that you apparently hate us, instead of going on with this narrative of blatant dishonesty, the audacity to pretend that you're noble or uphold any type of civility, that you know anything about truth or justice, as if you uphold truth and justice and equality, or there's nothing fair about you, there's nothing noble about you, there's nothing righteous about you, there's nothing justifiable, there's nothing respectable about the process of how sectors of people are treated and or mistreated in this society all over the world, not just here. So then you go on with a narrative which is blatantly dishonest about WOC and SGs, and we are not respected because how we are mistreated and how we are interacted with is not of a respectable experience. Instead of hiding behind this notion or this so-called perpetuated political correctness and the foreseeable authoritative figures, why not just get out of the way that one, just get it out of the way and just put it out there that number one, you are not a model of virtuous character and that you do not uphold and abide by justice. You do not uphold and abide by integrity. You do not uphold nor abide by equality. You do not uphold nor abide by equal opportunity. You do not uphold nor abide by law-abiding formality. No, because if you were, this type of catastrophic dilemma would not ever occur, or would not occur for as long as it has, and the way that it has, and then the lack of representation to confirm exactly what I'm saying, meaning that it's almost unheard of, these atrocious and vile behaviors and acts which are perpetuated by what so-called society has accepted as respectable characters within their community. Number two, that liberty and justice for all is not even close to the truth, not even remarkably close to the truth, not even within the realm of truth. That liberty and justice for all might as well be removed in this whole ritualistic chatter, since liberty and justice is a so-called privilege, while the likes of those who uphold the scapegoat role and the WOC role, which is the cultural norm, and it has been in effect for a while. Number three, that lying, cheating, killing, stealing, and being a criminal is acceptable, and it is an acceptable way of living. Unless that is if ASG or WOC are the ones that are being the liars, cheaters, killing, stealing, and or criminal behavior, or unless they're being accused or assumed of being the perpetuators of the lying, stealing, chilling, the lying, cheating, killing, stealing, criminal behavior. Yet we're always accused, so this is nothing new to me. Being kind and careful with my words is required. Why? It's an unsettling reality that these words that I say, written or spoken, are taken as an offense, or may even go on to be so-called consequences, I've learned time and time again. But nonetheless, it will not prohibit me from stating them, because at least I have the audacity to truly be courageous, which is outstanding in a world of such corruption. Okay, that scapegoats and women of color are far too often blamed, mistreated. It's beyond callous what is done to the scapegoats and women of color. It's beyond inhumane. It's beyond uncivil. This amount of vile behavior and the amount of this wretched act and behavior is beyond a definition. Nothing logically will excuse or erase this truth that several have partaken in such an unforgivable act of defiling the essence of life, and it has been through this suppression of one's ability, opportunity, and desire to be alive, denying those who are not guilty, however deemed guilty, through subjection of roles that the living choicer simply disagrees or disregards this as their role to conform to. It is the epitome of absurdity and irrational. This destruction and the destruction of character, this destruction behavior and the destruction of character and the restructuring of false narratives is this society's cultural norm, and the methods of such controlling and evasive quote unquote relations unwanted by the scapegoats and WOCs of this world, really, and is rather perplexing. Perhaps those controlling are too idle or bored, that focusing or living is just not obtainable. Therefore, controlling and dismantling WOC and SG is the best thing that their minds and their brains have the capacity to do, while UNLIVING. I have to have high hopes and keep a certain theme and tone, because unlike what is often seen as irreversible or irreparable, or as if we've descended way too far into an atmosphere or environment of hell, I don't entirely believe that. And just because majority of people choose to do that doesn't mean that it makes it acceptable for me to consent and then partake in being just as evil and vicious. If I sit around idly by in silence, condoning such an atrocious, unforgivable act, it's criminal, and it's criminal whether it happens to you. I don't believe that replacing this system with a female-ran world, or that it needs to be a black-ran world. I don't believe in any of that. I truly would want to see people be able to connect and able to actually think for once. And this whole thing also is that I just never really enjoyed the idea of how this slavery goes on. I'm not against slavery, and I don't disbelieve in superiority. My views may change, but this is one thing that has remained with me for quite a while. And I believe that some people are superior, but it has little to do with this perspective of race, and it has little to do with a perspective of gender. I think it's a self-assigned and self-addressed type of event.